Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in today. If you're tuning in from the festival, thanks so much for joining us. And if you're watching this at a later date, thanks so much for watching. I'd like to start off today by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we all gather today, wherever that might be. That's great about being virtual, isn't it? And I'd like to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and acknowledge that the sovereignty of this land was never ceded. Okay, so I am very excited to be here today. I think this was one of the panels that I was most excited to be able to be a part of today. It's going to be a really interesting one for anyone involved in sport or who has an interest in disability sport. So I'm joined here today by Sophie Lynch and Nick Warren. Sophie is an occupational therapist and an NDIS mentor. Sophie also helped Disability Sport and Recreation to create the NDIS Sports Guide, which she'll be taking you through today in her presentation. As well as being an OT and mentor, Sophie also manages her brother's NDIS plan. And so I think that's a really great element to see because she's gone through and had the lived experience of navigating the NDIS process. Sophie's joined today, as I mentioned, by Nick. Nick is the Manager of Marketing and Community Relations for Solve and specialises in occupational therapy services and custom assistive technology, and that's in a statewide capacity. So also a really great reach there. I will note today this session is being recorded. However, we'd love to have your questions as you think of them. You can either post them in the questions section, otherwise just feel free to pop them in the chat. I'll also note that we do have quite a few resources that we'll be linking you through to today, and I'll be putting those links in the chat as we go along. Please don't feel like you have to click through them in real time. We will have it all available for you afterwards in the Hop-In platform as well. All right, so let's get started, I think, team. I'll hand over to Sophie first.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for the introduction. As I said, my name is Sophie Lynch. I'm an occupational therapist and support coordinator. So if we just go through to the next slide. So if we got here, I'll just move this. So the Australian Sports Commission undertook some research into disability sport in 2010, and they found there were 75% of those currently active in sport wanting to do more, and 85% of those inactive in sport actually wanting to engage in physical activity. So the research looked into what were these barriers that prevented people from engaging, and they were the lack of money, pricing, no access to facilities close to home, but the largest barrier was the lack of government support. So enter the NDIS and the rollout of that, we had the potential to break down these barriers. But what is the NDIS? So the NDIS is the National Disability Insurance Scheme. So it's for Australians under 65 who have a permanent and significant disability. And the NDIS say that they fund reasonable and necessary supports to help those participate, achieving their goals and live their life to a full and independent life. So within the NDIS, participants receive individualised packages, and they contain funding that is allocated to a whole range of different things that relate to their NDIS goals and to their disability. So if we go to the next slide, in 2017, there was a productivity commission into the supports. However, we found, if you can see at the bottom of the graph that I've got here, it's hard when I'm not pointing to it, health and wellbeing received a very low percentage of total supports committed, as well as things such as social and civic and assistive technology were the lowest funded kind of things. But that's where sport and recreation fit in. So that's where the NDIS Sports Guide came in. So we've created this guide to help people get active in sport and recreation within their NDIS plans. So the NDIS Sports Guide that I'll run through today is on the Disability Sport and Recreation website. If you look to the side, there's an easy read version that comes with a lot of pictures, and that's targeted at people with an intellectual disability, lower literacy levels, and those that have English as their second language. as well, that it comes in an audio version that you can click on. And then there's also, you can download it to a plain language. But the one I'll run through is the one on the website today. So the guide is spread out into 6 steps. So the first step is to find a sport and recreation activity. Now, if you're here, a lot of you might already be engaging in these activities, but where can we find additional ones, or for those who are just finding it as a start point? So I heard there was a great talk from AAA Play yesterday, and we've got a link there to their website where you can find accessible sport near where you live. But as well, there is, you can follow the Sport Rec access steps to find a sport that is right for you, or you could become a member of the Disability Sport and Recreation and find out the latest news about inclusive sports that are in Victoria. So the next step in the guide, if we go across, is doing your research. So finding out what you need to participate in sport and recreation. So sometimes when we go to the planning process, they can be quite overwhelming. I've attended about 60 or 70 planning meetings across my work, and sometimes it can be a lot, and sometimes you can come away going, oh, I forgot to mention this. So that's why we say preparation is key. So if you look at the things you might need, we spread them out into equipment, transport, and accessibility and support. And there's a template that you can use to write this down. So if we go to the next slide, these 3 areas, the first one being equipment. And so Nick, being the expert in equipment, will talk a bit more about this. But it's more about thinking what aids and equipment you might need to participate in the sport and recreational activity that you want to engage in. Will you need an occupational therapist or a physiotherapist to help fit those aids for you, and including that within your template that you fill out. The next step is transport. So how will you get to and from there? If it's getting a taxi, there's a link there on the levels of transport funding that you may be eligible for through the NDIS. Will you have a support worker take you? So do you need support worker funding to be able to have someone drive you to and from there? And then the last thing to consider is your support needs. And if you just go to the next slide, will you need support just to get to and from there? Or while you're at the facility, will you need a support worker to take you to the bathroom, help you with medication, be with you while you're participating? So these are all the things we need to think about and write down the possible things you might need to be funded within your NDIS plan. So if we go to the next slide, it's about making sport and recreation part of your life. So one thing the NDIS love is evidence, and it's really good to bring a lot of things to your planning meeting. So when you walk away, they don't just forget what you've said and go, oh, you never mentioned that. It's always good to have evidence to back up what you need. So within here, we've included a link to a template, which has a Monday to Sunday, different times, and you can write in when you might engage in these sports and the frequency. We're seeing plans now, usually they're a 12-month plan, sometimes we're seeing 6-month plans, sometimes we're seeing 2 or 3 year plans. So writing down the frequency you need for 1 week means that they can then multiply it by your plan period. So you're not getting funded for 52 weeks of sport, but you've got a 2-year plan. So it's just making sure you've got your needs written down. And then the next step of the guide is kind of tying it all together, because the basis of the NDIS is goals. So the NDIS will only include funding if it's based on related to your disability and related to an NDIS goal that you set out. So I've included here, and some of you may be familiar with the support categories of the NDIS. It's a big long price guide with lots of different line items. So I've just included a few that sport and recreation can fit into. So under the capacity building section, there's a increased social and community participation. And under this, there is a community participation activities, which include things that you can get. And this is all straight from, what they've written in their price guide. You can get camps, classes, sporting coaches, and any of those similar activities that build an individual's skills and independence. And as well, under capacity building, they have improved health and wellbeing. So this includes things such as personal training, exercise physiology, and these are about maintaining or increasing physical mobility, but also promoting physical capacity and health. And then the next slide, there's the core funding, which is the most flexible funding across the NDIS. So under there, sport and recreation fits nicely under assistance with social and community participation, which sounds very similar to the other one, but it's a bit different. And it includes things like fitness classes, group activities, as well as having a support person that can come and attend these activities with you. And then the last one is capital, which again, Nick will talk to more as the expert in that area. But these might be things such as a daily adaptive equipment. So these are off-the-shelf products that might be more expensive due to adaptations required to meet your needs. So it might be a saddle for horse riding, but you need something just a little bit more supportive. So they will fund that difference between the regular priced one and the more expensive one that you may need to purchase, as well as assistive technology. So these are complex equipment that you will require an occupational therapy or physiotherapy report to ensure it's suitable. And this might be a sports wheelchair for basketball or tennis or something like that. And then to kind of get this down in writing, we've got a bit of a spreadsheet about putting your goals together. So it's got your goals. The next part is then what sport and recreational activities will help you achieve these goals, and then what supports may you need. So it's about tying everything we've kind of discussed together and putting it on one spreadsheet that you can bring to your planning meeting. And then the fifth step is putting all this information we've discussed together. So if we go to the next slide, there's a checklist that we've put together that you can print out and go through to make sure you've got information for your planning meeting. This checklist is very broad and aimed at a whole range of disabilities. So if you're looking for something a bit more specific in regards to equipment, Nick will be discussing a checklist that he has that's much more comprehensive into that area. But this checklist just goes over, having information on your disability, bringing information on sports or recreation activities you already participate in or may want to participate in, information, as we discussed before, about aids and equipment, transport, support needs, and then having, your list of your goals that we just discussed and the template of your weekly activities. So then lastly, you've had your planning meeting or you're about to have your planning meeting, and we've just got a few tips and tricks to remember. So the first one is to ask for help. So if it's your second or your third planning meeting, you may have a support coordinator, which will do a lot of that information gathering for you. But if it's your first planning meeting or you don't feel that that support coordinator is supporting your needs as well as they should be, we've got a link to some advocacy organisations that are really helpful for attending planning meeting with you, knowing your rights, knowing the legislation around the NDIS and kind of being there to back you up on that. And then the next thing is, if you do get that plan back and it's not suited, you obviously have the right to review your plan. So we've got a link there to the different types of reviews that I won't go into because there's a whole range depending on what area you want reviewed, but there's a link that explains them all there, and you can ask the person that made the plan. So whether that be a local area coordinator or it might be your NDIS planner, about what's the best review for you to go under. And the last step there is that remembering that sport is more than just a fun activity that you get the leisure of engaging in. So we've included a link to some benefits of why sport and recreation are not just a fun activity. There's social, psychological and physical benefits. And we've got some evidence-based links there with references that you can either print out and take to your planning meeting or write down so you can advocate or have your supports advocate that it's not just a leisure activity you want to engage in, it's an important part of your life. So if we go across to this page here, where can you access this sport guide? So it's on the Disability Sport and Recreation website. I've done some circles, which I've noticed my top ones dropped down a little bit, but in the Get Active spot at the top, you can see the link that's sort of covered, and it says NDIS Sports Guide. And as well on the main page, where the big circle is there, there's the Read Your NDIS Sports Guide there. So we've got two places you can find on the main page of the Disability Sport recreation website. And as well, I've included a link that might have dropped off at the bottom of the slide, but it just says that while this guide is created, as we know, the NDIS is ever evolving, changing constantly, that, you know, we see, I think 3 or 4 price guides come out this year. So always checking the NDIS website just to make sure if there's any changes, you're across that, because obviously we aim to update this guide as frequent as possible. But yeah, the NDIS changes in the blink of an eye. So yeah, that's our NDIS Sports guide. So thank you. And over to you, Nick.
Well, I'll just quickly jump in there. Sorry, Sophie. So I know I've put a lot of resources if you're looking in that chat section there. Please note you don't have to copy and paste those now. If you just visit the Disability Sport and Rec website, as Sophie referenced there, you'll be able to get all of those resources and the steps to go through the guide. But thank you so much, Sophie. That's a really comprehensive overview of it. Did anyone have any questions that they wanted to ask Sophie at this point? Because I know there was a lot of information there. If you wanted to, feel free to just type them in the chat as we go. Otherwise, we might hand over to Nick now.
Thanks, Megan. Great job, Sophie. That's it's such a valuable resource. It's packed full of really useful information. And that resource, I think, really highlights that broader sport and rec and community activity. I'm going to drill down into some specific parts that Sophie had mentioned relating to equipment. So as Megan said at the beginning, I work for Solve Disability Solutions. We specialize in occupational therapy services and custom assistive technology. We also work in a commercial space at modifying commercial assistive technologies to make sure that the equipment is fit for person, meaning that it's fit for you. It's not just off the shelf and it's the best you can find. We try to make sure that the equipment that you have really works for you and your unique abilities. So I'm going to drill down to the sport and rec equipment in the NDIS. I'm going to start with a story from a young man called Chris, who has an amazing capacity building story through the use of assistive technology in different areas of his physical fitness, and now moving into cycling and accessing his community. We'll go over some specific goal settings for your NDIS plans. I also have a tips and checklist that is more equipment focused, but Sophie's is really comprehensive into that wider space. But if you're specifically looking for equipment, I've got a checklist for you, which we'll provide a link for as well. Talk a bit about Freedom Wheels, what Freedom Wheels is, being customized bicycles. Freedom Wheels is one of our, I guess, our highlight programs that offers cycling options for people of all ages and all abilities. And then I've got some more information and some special offers for you at the end. So might go to the next slide, Megan. And if you can hit play on Chris's story. Not sure we got the volume, Megan. While Megan's looking for the volume, I might just give a little an introduction on Chris. So Chris is a young man with autism spectrum disorder, and he came to us with the goal of wanting to get exercise and get into shape and lose some weight, really trying to look after his health. He wasn't very motivated by going to places like gyms and using conventional equipment or having an exercise plan, but Chris loves Pluck a Duck. I don't know if anybody remembers Hey Hey Saturday. Pluck a Duck was the main feature character on that. They had this wonderful little exercise bike that made the ducks spin around, and then people could win prizes. So looking at Chris's intrinsic motivations, we tried to mix the things that motivate him, Pluck a Duck, with an exercise routine to try to get him more active. And Megan, if you've got the volume up, we'll see how Chris goes.
Hi, my name's Christopher Pike. I'm 28 and I have autism.
That's great.
Hi, my name's Christopher Pike. I'm 28 and I have autism. The last time I remember having a bike was probably 8 or 9 years old, and I think the bike broke and I never got another one. So a bike like this would be absolutely incredible, and I really appreciate people going out of their way to help me like that. I got the Plucker Duck bike because I'm a mad Hey Hey It's Saturday fan, and I wanted to combine my love for Hey Hey and Plucker Duck and turn it into an exercise routine that I could use weekly. My goal with the Plucker Duck apparatus was to improve my fitness and to access the community more broadly with it. I've achieved the first part. I feel like I'm getting more exercise in more regularly than what I was, and that's improved me to access the community and be able to walk places that I probably couldn't get to before. And than what I was, and that's improved me to access the community and be able to walk places that I probably couldn't get to before. And it's helping me to walk my dog Jackson easier. It's also helped in my general health as well. I'm looking to start riding around the block to start off with, but I'm going with my carers to go on rail trails and like road trails and stuff like that, because I'm really into roadworks and railways and stuff like that, so I'd like to experience them more. I love the red colour. I love how it rides once I get into the step of it. Hi, my name's Christopher Pike and this is my active life.
Thanks, Megan. So that's Chris's story. Chris is a remarkable young man from regional Victoria. And like I said, we started off with a goal, a short-term goal of just increasing his exercise. I guess that's an important thing to highlight, is there's short-term goals and then there's long-term goals. And one short-term goal has helped Chris build capacity around his exercise from working out at home with his Plucker Duck apparatus to now accessing the community on his truck, which has helped build his confidence. He's got a dog now, and he's more engaged with his community, which is I guess his longer term goal. But in order to get that sort of equipment like that, something very custom, something very fit for Chris, you need to make sure that you can find funding for it, because even though our organization relies heavily on the technical skills of volunteers, occupational therapists, the raw materials that it takes to make making sure your equipment is going to be funded by your NDIS plan is really important. So Sophie had talked a bit about that, but I'll dive a little bit more into it now. So the NDIS will provide funding for assistive technology in the support of your goal. So as Sophie said, getting your goal very clear is going to be really key to making sure that you get your equipment funded. So when you do speak to your NDIS planner, you need to have some idea about what sort of equipment you need, because as much as NDIS planners are very smart, they might not know what equipment's available out there. I can guarantee you none of them would have thought about a Plucker Duck exercise bike for Chris's plan. So coming to an organization like Solve, we can help identify what sort of equipment might help you, and then and what that equipment can do as far as building your capacity. So we can also help with helping you write your goals, so that you can make sure your equipment is directly tied to supporting your goal. We can go to the next slide, Megan. So for example, Freedom Wheels customized bikes. So if you see the little guy here in the front, he's on a very customized bike. He's got industrial sized outriggers on there. He's got a thoracic support that's helping keep his balance and posture wise riding the bike so he can safely ride a bike. In order to get this covered, there are some guidelines around this, and the recreational activity needs to relate to one of your goals. So for example, developing greater social networks or greater inclusion in the community would be a goal. A Freedom Wheels customized bike can be one thing that helps you do that. So making sure that your goal and the equipment is directly tied, not just I want a bike, but this is my goal. If we can go to the next slide. So If the goal for you or your child's bike is just to ride a bike, as it says there on the first bullet, it may not be funded. So it needs to be very specific around the activities that you or your child want to access by riding the bike. So riding with friends and family in the park or participating in school and community sporting events would be a really good example for how to write that goal versus I just want to ride a bike. Want to go to the next slide? Here's another good example here. The goal for my child is to develop greater social networks and have greater social inclusion in the community by participating in activities such as cycling with friends and family. To achieve this goal, my child needs a Freedom Wheels bike. So really specifying exactly what they need in there, because there has been times where the goal wasn't written clearly, and when the request for funding went through, it got kicked back because it wasn't correct in there. So Sophie mentioned an expression called reasonable and necessary supports. So a Freedom Wheels bike would be very reasonable and necessary for this. So if you came to solve and had a Freedom Wheels assessment, we would assess either you or your child's needs, what sort of bike would be suitable for them, what sort of adaptations and modifications that you or your child might need in order to safely ride a bike. Next slide, please. So here are the tips. This is our little tips checklist. And actually, I'm going to include a link in the panel just because there's a lot of information here. And I'll go through them really quickly because these are actually really quite helpful in preparing for it. This expands off of what Sophie was saying earlier. So making a list of your current equipment or assistive technology is really important so that they know what you've already got. And that can also help identify what equipment you need, which is the second one down there. Writing down how much it costs to get the equipment, so how much the equipment costs, as well as service and maintenance. For things that are a bit high tech, things like a bike, it might require ongoing maintenance and support. So it's good to come to, say, an organization like Solve or an equipment provider and get a quote. So when you go in and have a discussion around what sort of equipment you might need, ask for a quote so that you know exactly how much it costs. That information is really useful for going to your planning meeting to make sure that if it's $500 that you need, that they don't give you less than what you need. So then you end up with a gap in the affordability of your equipment. Asking your therapist to complete an assistive technology assessment form. So getting a prescription from a qualified occupational therapist is really imperative to this because they're assessing your needs. They're also looking at the available equipment on the market that is going to help you achieve your goals. Talking to your NDIS planner, sharing all the information that you've gathered, the information that's been provided to you by a therapist or by an equipment provider is really helpful. And sometimes connecting your planner with your therapist in case they have any questions can also help because there's a lot of things to remember. As Sophie was saying, there's a lot of information. You don't want to have to do all the heavy lifting yourself. So sometimes connecting your planner and your therapist is really great. And next slide, yeah. So the process for getting your equipment from Solve, it's pretty, it looks simpler than it is. It sometimes can take a little while to get equipment approved. Also, if you're having it built, so recognizing when you need your equipment by, what sort of equipment is available is really important, and booking in sooner than later because occupational therapists are in very high demand these days. So coming in for a trial with an occupational therapist is the first step. So book a trial. You can request the service. Say, for instance, you wanted to come in and have an assessment with a Solve occupational therapist. You can go right to the Solve website at solve.org.au. Come in. We'll provide a quote. We can help you with your paperwork, and then working with your local area coordinator to make sure that we get you all of the forms and documentation in. And then once your payment's approved by the NDIS, then the equipment's yours. So it's mapped out on our website, but this just gives you an idea of the steps to getting assistive technology, because depending on the type of equipment, it can be a little bit more complex than just walking into a shop and pulling something on the shelf. Next slide, please. So I've talked a little bit about Freedom Wheels, and I've got a little video here for you to give you a bit more information and insight as to what the Freedom Wheels program is. Megan, if you can press play. I think we're missing some sound, Megan.
Freedom Wheels is a national service where skilled staff and volunteers work closely with people, their families and therapists to create customised bicycles. Every Freedom Wheels bike is built to the individual's height and weight, as well as physical and cognitive abilities. Our customised supports give children and adults with a disability the confidence and the freedom to ride a bike. Supports can be easily removed for transportation and storage. Freedom Wheels gives people the opportunity to ride their bike with family and friends at local parks, in the community and at school. Riding brings fun, improved well-being and social and community participation. Freedom Wheels, because everyone deserves the chance to ride a bike.
So that's just a little promo video of what Freedom Wheels is. I would like to re-emphasize that Freedom Wheels is for all ages and all abilities. Freedom Wheels is available across Victoria. We do weekly clinics at our Abbotsford office. We've got an on-site cycling assessment. We've also got a makerspace where the bikes are actually built. So you or your child can come and actually get fitted for a bike ride on site and actually see somebody building that bike for you. It's so exciting to watch and see, especially for first-time riders who are getting their very first bike. Coming up in the new year, we've already got plans to head out to Ballarat, Bendigo, Geelong, and Mornington. So if you're interested in attending any of those clinics, freedomwheels.org.au. There's a button right at the top of it that says Start Riding. It gives you more information about upcoming dates. And also you can put in your details and get in touch with a member right from the website, and someone from a member of our team will get in touch with you. Next slide, please. Can you hear me? Oops, sorry, just want to make sure. Sorry. So for more information, if you go to solve.org.au/NDIS, there's a lot of information in there on assistive technology and the NDIS. We've got a separate site for Freedom Wheels. So Freedom Wheels also has some information on the NDIS as well. That's where you can find your checklist, all the tips and some examples of writing a goal and getting your equipment funded through the NDIS can be found on those websites. If any of that is confusing, call us on our 1300 number, and a member of our staff would be happy to help work through any questions you might have. And next slide.
I hate to disappoint you, Nick, but I think that's the end of my slideshow.
Oh, no, that's okay. No, I might have missed one. So I would like to say that assessments for Freedom Wheels, they're free assessments. So it costs you nothing to come down and have a one-on-one with a therapist, trial a bike, get your quote, get your information, and then we can go through the NDIS funding process. But assessments are free, so I highly recommend that you book in because they're in high demand these days because everyone's trying to get out and get on a bike.
Absolutely awesome. Thank you so much, Nick and Sophie, for sharing your wealth of wisdom and some really great stories in there as well. I know I've watched both of those videos a couple of times now, and it's still just so nice to see the smile on people's faces when they get to do something that's been a barrier for so long. I was wondering, and again, I just wanted to give people another chance if they wanted to put any questions in the chat. These are two really intelligent, clever people here, particularly when it comes to the NDIS. So if you had any questions around NDIS funding and how you can use that for sport and rec, please feel free to do so now. But I guess I was just wanting to finish up maybe with a question to you both, just to give people a bit of time while they're doing in the chat. For someone who might be feeling, I guess, a little bit disheartened by the process, or maybe potentially a little bit overwhelmed by it, what would be one piece of advice you could offer? Nick, did you want to go first because you're unmuted?
I mean, the NDIS is, as Sophie said, it's ever changing. It's an imperfect system, but it's improved incredibly just in the past few years. There's a lot of supports, and there's a lot of people like Sophie and myself and DSR that can help point you in that right direction. So if it feels overwhelming, sing out, ask for help. You know, the links and email addresses are there for you. There are helpful people on the other end of that. They can help walk you through step by step. You know, if you're a busy person or a busy mom, and you're just not sure where to start, that's what organizations like us are there for. Those checklists, I know they might just seem like a piece of paper, but they really do help you get organized, and make sure that you come to that planning meeting prepared and your NDIS plan is set up for success. And you can access the equipment and support that you need.
Yeah, wonderful. Awesome advice there, Nick and Sophie. Oh,
there we go. I think that was great advice. And to kind of follow up on that, I guess just knowing it's not the end. So, you know, when you get a plan, it can sometimes feel a bit, oh, this is what I've got, and maybe it's missing some things or it's not enough. And there's just so many different reviews. And even if that review doesn't go great, I know it's a long process, but it doesn't mean that one plan's for the rest of your life. You can go, okay, well, let's link in with some services with the plan you have to help you then review and get your next plan. So I think that's a really good tip that I say to a lot of people is when they get a plan that they don't love, link in with some services and start, and then get those services and use that funding to get them to help you to get your next one, and put a review in if need be, because if it's reasonable and necessary, they escalate it to a higher level, and they're more qualified people as you go up, who know a bit more, and hopefully will get you that plan that you need.
Yeah, awesome advice there as well. And I really agree. It's not the plan for the rest of your life. It's a constantly evolving process, which is really good to remember. We've had a question from the audience. Are local area coordinators becoming more understanding of sport and rec and being supported by NDIS funding?
Yeah, I might jump in on that one. I do think that the first couple of years of NDIS, it was all about what you needed just for life. And now that we've had a few cycles, people have had, you know, potentially their first, second, and sometimes third plan. Now it's about what you want to do. And that reasonable and necessary extends into not just what you need to survive, what you need for daily living, but it's what you want to do. You know, sport and recreation has so many benefits for community, for, you know, the physical health benefits, and the NDIS is recognizing those. And in essence, the local area coordinators are. But I think to go back to what we were saying before, coming prepared with what you're interested in, the types of things like you might want as far as funding for a program, a camp, equipment, those sort of things, coming prepared helps eliminate any of those shortfalls that you might have in with the NDIS support workers or the local area coordinators.
Anything you wanted to add to that, Sophie?
No, that was pretty much summed it up. I think we are seeing more and more education around the different types of disability, different types of equipment, different types of program. I think they're getting more training into people's needs and wants, but that needs aren't just, you know, the basic kind of things to get you through the day, but that people's needs are recreation and sport and things beyond that. So we are seeing a bit more understanding. Definitely a work in progress, and, you know, obviously everyone's individual, so it might not be everyone, but yeah, hopefully we can get some better plans coming through.